Welcome to Dog on the Plot. I'm Kerry, this is Dory, and this has been our full-size UK allotment plot for the last 2 years. But we're leaving, and I'm going to tell you why. So this isn't a decision that I've taken lightly, and it's been on the cards for a little while. I've dropped some hints that there might have been some changes coming up to the channel. But yeah, it's been almost 2 years that I've been on this plot now. So it was October half term when I first came down and viewed the plot and fell in love with it instantly. And I was on tenterhooks for about 2 months waiting to see if it would actually become mine. And then I got the plot in mid-December and started filming straight away, didn't we, Dory? In fact, we were sitting right here just like this on our first day of filming on the plot, and I've had 2 full seasons on the plot, one very successful, I think, and the second one, this year's season, less so. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there's a general kind of disappointment with this year for a lot of people because of the weather. Really, it's been the weather and what's come with the weather, which is an awful lot of pests, particularly slugs. So it's been a difficult year, and a year where you do start to question the amount of effort that you have to put into an allotment plot and the return on that effort, especially when you work full time and you have other commitments and things. It's like, what can you invest into the plot? How much can you invest into the plot and get a good return on that? And I don't mean just in terms of the amount that you harvest and sort of the costs that you put in it and the produce that you get out of it, because I think there's a lot more that you factor into that, including the enjoyment of being on the plot. And I hope that's come across over the last 2 years that I've been very invested in my plot in lots of ways, economically, but also very emotionally. And it's given me an awful lot over that time. But I think you've probably also picked up on in the last couple of months that it's become more and more difficult. So there's lots of things that I do really love about my allotment plot, and it's funny because it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, because one of the things I really love is that it looks so green all the time. And of course it looks so green all of the time because it has grass paths. And as you might know, the grass paths have slightly been the bane of my life. No, not quite the bane of my life, but certainly one of the trickier things about this particular plot, because the grass paths require a lot of maintenance. They require a lot of strimming and edging. And I'm not particularly good at edging. And if you're not good at edging, then the grass tends to creep up onto the beds, and that creates obviously a problem. Now, I was thinking about Charles Dowding, because of course he has the grass paths and the lovely beds. But he also says a team of people working for him, and it's a market garden, and that this is a hobby. It's a hobby, and I didn't really sign on for a hobby that was strimming. That's not the hobby I wanted. The hobby I wanted was growing food and growing plants. So the grass paths are a big reason why my plot became particularly challenging. And also with the grass paths, you get the pests. And there are 2 pests in particular that have been really difficult. And that is, of course, slugs and snails. There is so much that I put out on this plot this year that just got eaten. I mean, ridiculous amounts. Not the sort of thing you think, well, I've put out 10 and I've lost 2, that's okay. Literally everything I put out got eaten. I mean, these pumpkins that were in this section here, what did I put in? Like 15 pumpkins. I think I ended up with 3 that were so badly damaged by the slugs that even those they didn't produce. There are lots of things that I put, all those cabbages. I had like dozens of cabbages that went out, all eaten. And that's disheartening. So that, and I think the grass paths in part are the problem, although there's an additional problem with the slugs that I'll come to in a moment. But the other one about the grass is, I think, fleas. So Dory, she is dog on the plot. She is on the plot. And I think what is also on the plot are little creatures that want to live in her fur. And we've battled the fleas a little bit, haven't we, over the last couple of years, Dory? And they keep coming back. And I think, you know, even though she's treated, and I try and do my best in terms of mitigating fleas, I think they're there. I think this is a habitat for fleas, and that's got particularly testing as well. The other thing that is difficult about this plot is the flooding. So it floods in the winter. Well, I say it floods in the winter, but because we had so much rain this summer, it was also quite floody during the summer. And what the previous tenant did to try and help with that is dig moats around the big beds. So the plot is also very uneven and wet, which makes it quite dangerous. So I slip a lot, I fall down the moats a lot. Pretty surprised that I've not had some kind of serious injury already on this plot, because I'm quite a clumsy person. So that's a problem. Thing about the slugs is, because there are moats, so you've got kind of an overhang. So where the grass paths go, an overhang, a dip, and then you go up onto the beds. Well, of course, that area is just a prime area for slugs to make their homes. And so they live under there, and then they come out at night and they eat everything, don't they, Dory? They eat everything. And then the fourth really challenging thing about this plot is the soil. So it's very, very compacted clay soil. I've built up on it, and I think I've done a good job of doing that, but you don't have to go very far to find the clay. In fact, it's right there. And the water table is really high. So in the winter, it's just claggy mess that you can't really do anything with. And if you try and dig a hole to plant something in, you're just taking out great chunks of clay. And the roots are obviously going to find it really hard to penetrate the walls then of that clay. And in the summer, if we do get a dry summer, it goes rock hard. And again, really hard then to plant in. Building up with the raised beds and adding, I mean, I've added 2 truckloads of compost onto this plot over the last 2 years, and that has definitely helped. I put loads of organic matter on, loads of grass clippings, loads of rabbit bedding, so straw and wood chip, yes, and wood shavings. A lot has gone on to this plot to improve that. And I think it has improved somewhat, but it's still difficult, and it's still, because of that clay soil, it still means that when it does flood, the water sits on top, and it does not drain. Now, I could have done more. I could have dug a French drain all the way under this plot. I could have rotivated the entire thing and flattened it so I didn't have the moats anymore. But I think that would have just caused the additional problem then with the flooding of it not even just sitting in certain areas, but the whole thing might be flooded. And I could have done those things, but I don't necessarily have the time to do those things, or the ability, the skill to do those things. Also, where am I sending the water? Straight into the plot next door, my brother-in-law's plot, this one, which isn't very fair, although we could have worked together, and we have spoken about potentially putting a French drain all the way across. I know my neighbour on the other side, Jim, he's digging a well. So he's going to have a whole well in his plot to try and divert the water into that. But it's a real problem, and it's because the houses behind me here, when they were built, there was a brook, and the builders just kind of diverted or buried the brook, but of course that water has to go somewhere. It's pretty much gone here on our 2 plots. After Mark's plot here, there is a little kind of diversion of the water, and it does go under the path and out to an outlet. a bit further down the site. So everything beyond our 2 plots isn't too bad. It still does flood a little bit, but not too bad. But this section of the site is just the worst. It's just the worst, I think. So, yeah. So I think over the last 2 years, I've kind of made the best of it, or I've tried to as much as I could to my ability. And I'm totally aware that there are worse problems to have. You know, I got a bit of bindweed up here and things like that, but there are plots that you get and they are massively overgrown, covered in brambles, perennial weeds and things like that. And I know because we've had this with Mark's plot next door. When he took on that plot three or 4 months after I got mine, the previous tenants of that plot had just used it as a tip. It was a rubbish dump, and there was so much that needed doing on that plot. And in fact, still when we dig on that and look around it, you will find stuff that has been dug into the ground, like magazines, catalogues and things that should have been delivered. They've been just dumped there, half burnt, and then wood chip stuck on tops to disguise it. So yeah, I am well aware there are real dumps of plots, and this was not a dump of a plot at all. This looked immaculate. It looked really perfect when I took it on, but I think those, you know, it can be deceptive. And when I took it on, I wasn't really aware of the flooding because it was sort of October time, so you couldn't see that it flooded at the time. I didn't know how hard the soil would be to work. And yeah, and I thought the grass paths looked really pretty, and wouldn't that be lovely? Without really realizing how much work they would be. And I guess all of this is to say that it's hard work, an allotment plot. It's rewarding, it's lovely, but it is hard work. And I think this year, with the season being particularly difficult, it's felt more like a chore a lot of the time. And although there's been quite a lot of highs, I did have a nice harvest in the end. It wasn't the harvest I had the previous year. It wasn't the harvest that I'd hoped for. But, I did get produce from the plot. I've enjoyed my time down here quite a lot. But there's also been a lot of disappointments. Every time you plant something, then a few days later coming down to see that it's been completely eaten or destroyed is really disheartening. And you start to wonder what you're doing it all for. So why do we do it? Why do I do it? I do it because I love the community side of things. I like the idea of growing in community, growing together. Although I also like that this is my own space. I've got this and it's mine to do what I want with. I love the fact that it is spacious, that I've got room to do things like potatoes and sweet corn and pumpkins when they grow. I love that. I love that even when things have been bad like they have this season, that there's still so much that you take away from it in terms of the pleasure that you take in the growing. And there is always something to harvest, even when it all kind of feels like it's going wrong, there is still stuff to harvest. There you go, talking about community and being on the plot. One of the plot neighbours, she couldn't get the lid off her tin of fence paint, so I've just done that for her. But that's the sort of thing, that kind of interaction with people and people helping you and sharing knowledge and being like-minded. Yeah, it's a real joy of the allotment. And therefore, I've been a bit sneaky. I'm not actually leaving the site. So I am leaving this plot, I'm leaving the flooding, I'm leaving these grass paths, but I am moving to pastures new on the same site. Actually, on the other side of the same site where there are no grass paths, there is no flooding, and the soil is an awful lot better. And I'm hoping that helps me to get a lot of the joy back again. That the things that have been problematic on this plot that won't be there, and I'm sure there will be their own challenges on that one, but they will be different to the ones on these that I have found to be slightly insurmountable for me in my current situation, working full-time, etc. So, excitingly, we are having a new plot. It's a new dog on, no, it's the same dog on a new plot. Dog on a new plot. Do I do a name change? No, I'm not going to do a name change. But yeah, it's dog on a new plot. So sorry for being a little bit tricksy there, but yeah, it is a big thing actually to say goodbye to this plot, my first ever plot. And I know people do chop and change plots quite a lot, and but I don't know that I expected to. I kind of thought that I was settled here and I would just keep battling whatever came along. But I think this is the best solution. I think this is going to make life much easier for me and mean that I can do the bits that I really enjoy and focus on the actual growing, as opposed to yeah, battling the challenges and strimming. Don't want to do any more strimming. If you were sort of thinking, I can't believe it, Kerry is actually going to give up her plot, and maybe she will dedicate herself to her home garden that also needs a lot of work and she doesn't have time for. But no, I'm just going to take on more. And it's going to be a busy couple of months because I've got 2 months to do the transition. I am paid up on my allotment plot until the end of the year. And as you might remember, I've already paid for next year, but that's okay. You just kind of pay the difference with the other plot, or get refunded the difference with the other plot. So that's okay. So I've got mine for the next 2 months, but the plot that I'm going to, the previous tenant has actually moved on. So they've finished, they've in fact put the allotment to bed and they've handed in their key, and they're not going to be working it for the next 2 months that they have officially got it. So I can start moving stuff down. And in fact, I did start moving some stuff down yesterday. But yeah, I kind of need your help on, what am I doing with everything and where is it going? Not so much the structures, because I mean, if you're looking at this greenhouse and thinking, didn't you just like 2 or 3 weeks ago take that from right at the other end of the plot to put on here? And now I'll be taking it right the way back again. Yeah, I know. But these things happen. So anyway, that greenhouse will be coming with me. Now, the small greenhouse, I'm actually going to pass on. So it was gifted to me. And as you might know, it was gifted to me by somebody who has now passed on under quite tragic circumstances. And I did feel like I wanted to do something with the greenhouse that would honour his memory. Putting the glass in would be a good start, and making it a nice growing space. But in all fairness, I don't need that greenhouse anymore. And I thought, actually, better to pass it along and honour his memory by doing what he did to me, which was gift me something that I needed at the time. And now I get to gift it to somebody who needs it now. And that person is my cousin. She's been given permission to have a very small greenhouse on her small plot. And this is just the right size. So, so that's going to get passed along. But the big one's going to come with me. I've got all my raised beds here that I got, and it'll be interesting to see how they work on the new plot. And I am going to show you the new plot at the end. Don't go away. I'm going to give you a sneak peek at the end. But I want to talk much more about the new plot in next week's episode. But yeah, the raised beds, all my wood, my arches. And then the thing I really need the help with is the plants. What should I do about, I put so many perennial plants onto this plot, very much thinking that I was going to be here for quite a long time. It's only been 2 years, so like the trees are still young and I could move those. I've got my perennial brassicas on here, particularly the 9-star broccolis, which I haven't even had cropped anything from yet. Got my Austerian tree cabbages. I've got the Taunton Dean kale. What else? The raspberry canes and things. I've got the cardoons. There are cardoons on the new plot, but yeah, I could move those ones as well. So there's that, there's the moving of things, and then there's clearing of the plot ready for the next person. So it's going to be a really busy couple of months. And one of the things that the steward has told me, and I'll be interested to see what you think about this, is that I need to dig over the plot for the next person. Now, in theory, like that's fine. It's like, yeah, I want to leave the plot in a good condition for the next person who takes it on, because that happened to me. The plot was in a lovely condition when I took it on, and indeed the new one that I'm taking on is all nice. But I've just spent 2 years making it no dig. And I've put like 300 quid's worth of compost onto the surface. It's, I was saying before, had the cardboard, the rabbit bedding, the grass clippings. I really tried to make this a no dig plot, and now I'm going to have to rotivate it. But it is what it is. That's what I've been asked to do, and I shall do it. And I will move on to my new plot and start no digging on there. And yeah, that's something else we can sort of get into a bit next week. But yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done, and it's an exciting time, but it's also one of those transitionary times where, you know, it's like when you're giving your notice in for a job and all you want to do then is just quit and go to the new job. I feel a little bit like this. I'm a bit like, I don't want to be sitting here on this plot anymore because I want to be down there doing that plot. But it's a couple of months, and yeah. And it's the right time of year to do it as well, in terms of moving things and just, I mean, this would be terrible to do mid-season when you've got all your crops growing and you've got to sacrifice them. But this is like the perfect time in autumn into winter to do this kind of move. So I've been very lucky in that sense as well. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, I hope that you're on board and excited about the next chapter of Dog on the Plot, Dog on the New Plot Dory, maybe less flea plot. That'll be good, won't it? And yeah, I hope you'll stick with me to see the next stage of the journey, really. Next week, I'm going to give you a proper tour of the new plot. But in the meantime, let's go give you a sneak peek.